This is Breakfast with Stephen Bumfrey on BBC Radio Norfolk.
That was the weekend then. How are you doing? It's 7 o'clock on Monday the 21st of January.
You've got to try some of this acid. It's absolutely crazy.
These online ads are really to attract young people. They're very interactive.
The typical number of units that a young person drinks has probably doubled over the last 10 to 15 years.
How talking to Frank has seen a fall in drugs use among young people. Have you heard of Frank? Also this morning...
Save the proposition! No strings attached!
We have no problems with new writing. Larger theatres may have, but our audiences turn up on the basis that it's an event.
And I cannot believe that there isn't a hidden agenda.
The protest against plans for Arts Council cuts here in Norfolk. And how do you see your future here in the county?
I'm not necessarily saying I'm making a very serious social commentary. I'm just exploring the darker sides of society as a whole. It just happens to be set in a place remarkably similar to Kings Lynn.
Heavy rain later, 12 Celsius, the high, the weather in full in a few minutes' time. First, the main news of the day. Here's Paul Mosley.
MPs are urging the government to think again about its policy on biofuels, saying it may do more harm than good. Britain's agreed with the EU that 10% of road fuel should come from a sustainable source by 2020. But a committee of MPs says that biofuels are ineffective at cutting greenhouse gases and can be expensive. And if you want a potentially chilling glimpse into the future of Kings Lynn, you can have one now. A local artist has put together a website with a video, pictures and stories of what happens to Lynn over the next 4 years. In short, it all gets flooded, but in the end the marina turns out to be very successful. On the downside, Swaffham is shut off from the rest of the world. Phil Barrington is the man who's put it together.
With all my work, I think I tend to exaggerate a point and see where that leads me. So I'm not necessarily saying that Kings Lynn itself is run down, or it's certainly under threat from flooding, but I'm just creating a fictional world, really. I suppose I have to say that, otherwise I'll be lynched by people.
The Sun is reporting a letter from one of its readers saying, "We're witnessing the downward spiral of Britain. Decent members of the public are being murdered by feral youths in our streets. MPs just give us sad eyes and sound bites. This is the equivalent of 2008 equivalent of Nero fiddling while Nero burns." And it's given over its entire front page to different events that happened over the past few years of murders of various people, various young people and older people as well.
Plus, a little bit later on the programme, where do you see your place in Norfolk in about 4 years' time?
Don't try to test unless you come proper.
Half of Norfolk has actually gone underwater. There are certain elements of society which troubles us all.
Don't try to test unless you come proper.
Fear of violence, fear of each other, pretty much. It's set 4 years in the future. It has contributions from 4 different individuals who find themselves in an ever-changing, quite bleak environment.
Don't try to test unless you come proper.
We take you to Cracktown a little bit later on in the programme.
The jury in the Suffolk murders trial is due to visit the sites where the bodies of 5 women were found. They've already seen some of the places in photos.
22 minutes to 8, it's Breakfast with Stephen Bumfrey, also on the programme this morning, taking you to Cracktown. Nothing to do with drugs, this particular Cracktown. It's a place not unlike Kings Lynn, and we're just 4 years down the road. Meanwhile, the Home Secretary, this is a bit worrying, Jackie Smith, says she's too frightened to go out on the streets at night. What do you make of that?
Well, I thought it was quite an admission, really. I mean, the government spends much of the time trying to reassure us all that crime is coming down, and yet a lot of people aren't exactly convinced. But she says she's afraid to go on the streets of London at night, although she does admit going out for a kebab in Peckham.
And how do you see your future here in the county?
I'm not necessarily saying I'm making a very serious social commentary. I'm just exploring the darker sides of society as a whole. It just happens to be set in a place remarkably similar to Kings Lynn.
If it's happening in Norfolk, it's happening on BBC Radio Norfolk.
Waiting lists across the county are still going up.
If you hear a siren, you run.
Engineers are trying to fix a power fault in part of Norwich. It's not known how many homes in the Plumstead estate have been affected. Talking of electricity, it seems that all the power the wind farm off Great Yarmouth makes isn't getting back to the shore. The firm that owns the turbines needs to put a new cable in. And an artist has put together photos, words and videos of what could happen to West Norfolk in the future. Kings Lynn is flooded, although eventually its marina is a big success. But Swaffham has to be closed off from the rest of civilization. BBC Radio Norfolk News. There's more in half an hour.
And we'll have, that report from Cracktown, it's called, a little bit later on in the programme in a few minutes' time, so don't go away. What do you see when you look to the future? Now, for one man in West Norfolk, it's apparently not too good. Phil Barrington has put together a fictional blog of people living in Old Lynn in 2012. Now, this includes diary entries and photos of what their world is all about. I went to meet him to find out why he's got such a bleak view of the future.
Don't try to test unless you come proper.
Half of Norfolk has actually gone underwater. There are certain elements of society which troubles us all.
Don't try to test unless you come proper.
Fear of violence, fear of each other, pretty much. It's set 4 years in the future. It has contributions from 4 different individuals who find themselves in an ever-changing, quite bleak environment where half of Norfolk has actually gone underwater. I'm interested in the fact of a whole entire region would live with half of it gone underwater, and how certain elements of society now gets exaggerated, such as fear of violence, fear of each other, pretty much, and fear of change.
Is this just, something that you thought might happen, or do you think it's something that definitely will happen?
Well, I'm not necessarily saying I'm making a very serious social commentary, but what I am saying is that there are certain elements of society which troubles us all, and not a lot of people tend to focus on why that is. So I tend to, with all my work, I think I tend to exaggerate a point and see where that leads me. So I'm not necessarily saying that Kings Lynn itself is run down, or it's certainly under threat from flooding, but I'm just creating a fictional world, really. I suppose I have to say that, otherwise I'll be lynched by people. But it is definitely a fictional world, but taking elements of society which we all feel.
So bleak times ahead, if your blog is anything to go by, and some pretty stark and bleak photographs to go with it. I hope you don't mind. I've got one picture as my wallpaper on my computer, which I recognise now was taken here. Just explain where exactly in Kings Lynn we are and what we actually see around us.
OK, well, we're seeing in front of us kind of like dilapidated, kind of beaten, perhaps estate agents would say rustic, kiosk with a couple of electric cables completely falling down, and there's debris around us. But if we stand right behind us, we have a very flourishing supermarket. We're actually standing at the edge of North Lynn at the moment, North Lynn Industrial Estate. So I like the kind of confliction between happy shoppers and unhappy environment here.
And this derelict area with the kiosk and like I say, almost like two street lamps, but instead of lamps at the end, they've got what used to be presumably closed-circuit television cameras. Does it look like to you?
It certainly looks like the guts have been ripped out of CCTV cameras around here, and there are mentions of CCTV on the blog every now and again, which of course Kings Lynn is famous for.
Yeah. And the man in the picture? The very fine black and white picture, the one I've got as my wallpaper?
Yes, the man in the picture is an elderly character by the name of Senior Scythe, and basically his character represents what I think we often all feel, a fear of crime, a fear of modern society, technology, all these kind of things. My impression is, and everyone's interpretation of the photographs is completely valid. My own particular interpretation of it is that he's looking out to a society that he no longer feels part of.
Why Cracktown?
Well, Cracktown, a lot of people have said to me, is there a drug problem in Kings Lynn or anything like that? Cracktown, to me, is about a cracked society, quite a fragile society, but it's also other meanings which I'm keeping secret for now, but it certainly hasn't anything to do with crack cocaine or any kind of drugs. And I'm certainly not making any messages for people who are saying this is what Kings Lynn is like. Kings Lynn is a glorious town, and there's a massive amount of regeneration, and it's absolutely fantastic. I'm just exploring the darker sides of society as a whole. It just happens to be set in a place remarkably similar to Kings Lynn.
And that was Phil Barrington speaking to me last week in Kings Lynn. In fact, it was Friday. It was wet, it was cold, it was windy, and it was fairly bleak where I was. If you want to have a look at it, go to abandonallhopenow.blogspot.com, which is a great title, isn't it? Fascinating stuff and some really sort of powerful picture material there. Thanks very much to Phil. I'm sure we'll be hearing more from Phil Barrington in the near future. Let's say good morning to Mary Pratt from Cocoa Bean Recruitment in Norwich, who's here as our breakfast guest.
Loads of women have been writing abuse on the website saying, you know, what about us? And upset Hillary Clinton.